Kids, you hear about missions a lot, and we have some missionaries here, and we want to introduce you to Roy and Holly Angle. That's why you're kind of staying in here, because we want you to know a little bit more about them, so when you pray for your missionaries, you'll be able to pray a little bit better for them. So Roy, where are you at? There you are.
Thank you, Doug. And good morning, Valley Grace Brethren Church. And you never stop by. What's with that? You know, it's Dublin, Ireland. It's only 7,000 miles. And it seems to be that we leave the porch light on for you and the keys under the mat, so you're welcome anytime. We have been in Ireland since 2003. And we took our kids there. Coleman was 5 and Avery was 3. And so they've grown up in Ireland. And the Valley Grace Brethren Church has partnered with us for 21 years. So we want to say thank you because our obligation, and here's where we are, and our calling is to be gardeners in the city of Dublin. And we look at the city of Dublin, 1.6 million people, as our garden, as our home. And it is where we are called to live out the gospel and to articulate the gospel in ways that they can understand. They can understand. And so that means knowing the culture. It means knowing the soil of Ireland. It means knowing their story, because missions is stepping into their story from our story with the gospel story. And that's what we're called to do. So we know that we want to know their story well. We want to know the garden well. And so we look at ourselves as planting the seed of the gospel in the hearts and minds of our friends, but also being the gospel in demonstrable ways, in ways that are touchable, in ways that are seen and tasted and smelt in concrete ways. And so one of those ways, well, a little bit before that, but we step into a particular situation, not just any situation. We're called to go into the world, and the world of Dublin, Ireland has its own particular story. And that story involves Christianity, and a kind of Christianity, of institutional Christianity, highly aligned with nationalism. Because to be Irish was to be what? Catholic. And to be Catholic was to be Irish. That was true up until recently. And so we have to understand that story in its own particularities. So they're familiar with words like pray, Jesus, gospel, Matthew, etc. But the meanings that they attach to those words are different than what maybe we would attach to those words. And so in that familiarity, over the past, say, couple of decades, there has been revealed institutional abuse of kids, of those in homes, and those in various educational institutions around Dublin and around Ireland. And this has brought a severe rebellion and distrust of the institutional church in Ireland. So we come in and we step into that story, and they say, well, we've heard this story before. How are we to know that you're any different than what we have suffered at the hands of our own Christian story? So we have to outlive that. We have to demonstrate that we are something different, that we are truly of the message of Jesus. And so that distorted message is what we face in Ireland. And so to offset that, we have deliberately decided to get close to people and walk with people over an extended period of time, because you cannot out-talk stigma. You have to outlive it. And you outlive it by concrete, demonstrable ways of being true to what you believe and what you are saying. And so we get close and we stay close. And here's Holly. Holly's, by the way, well, Holly's right here. No, she's shaking her head. Don't do that. So I won't do that. So you can meet her afterwards. But recently, Holly got a 4-year degree in 3D design. And here she is with the same group of students, fellow students who are young enough for them to call her auntie, but they didn't. But she repetitiously walked with her fellow students for 4 years. And they got to see that Holly was different. They got to taste that Holly was different. When she brought up her faith, there was substance to it. Not perfection, but there was substance to it. And that led to questions and conversations about the gospel. One of the things that we also do, this is a group of people. We host conversations in cafes and even in pubs that talk about significant life issues. And one of these conversation groups is called Socrates Cafe. And so we invite them to talk about what is love? Whose morality? How do you know what is true? How do you know if God exists? Those kinds of topics we put online, and we invite people to come to the cafe and have conversations about that group. And this is a picture of one of those evenings. There are probably 2 Christians in this whole group. Again, being seed in the surrounding cultural soil. And so there we host discussions, and we give the gift of respectful dialogue to Dublin. And heaven knows, in this day and age, we need grounding and we need spaces for respectful disagreement over topics. And Christians should be at the forefront of that and gift to their community. So this is what we do in Dublin with Socrates Cafe. Socrates Cafe is held, we have 2 of them, and they're held once a month at the cafe called Third Space. Recently, we've provided encounters for those who lean in to spiritual receptivity. In other words, when God comes up, their eyes don't glaze over, they don't run away, they don't shut down the conversation, they respond, and they ask questions, they're engaged. So recently we provided that next step for people about coming together with the same Socratic dialogue and talking directly and openly about Christian things. So we read Christian books. It's stated right up front. We're going to get together at a restaurant. We're going to have a meal. Meals are so important. We're going to have a meal, and then we're going to talk about Christianity. We had a book. We read one of Tim Keller's books, Making Sense of God, back at the end of last year. Earlier this year, we read C.S. Lewis's Screwtape Letters together, and here we are reading the Gospel of Luke. And so this is an overt sign that the Spirit is at work, and He's at work in the hearts and lives of our friends. We're also united with a church planting effort in our own neighborhood called Eden Collective, and here we are. We're a small group. Here we are having a Sunday service and then with a meal afterwards. And so I'm on the leadership team of this church, and the leader is bivocational. He's the man on the far right here, Ross. And this group gets together with the intention of being a collective communal light in our neighborhood. Let me close with this story. As a kind of a spin-off of Socrates Cafe, I started meeting with Kuba. Kuba's Polish, and I gave him a lift back from one of our meetings to his house. He lives near us. And on the way, he started mentioning reading theology. So when you hear things like this, your ears poke up and you go, oh, tell me about that. What do you mean by that? Long story short, we started meeting monthly at a local park near where we live and just taking walks around the park talking about theology and philosophy. Then he said, I have a friend who knows about what we're doing. Can she come along? And I said, no. No, of course not. You know, this is like a gift. I said, of course she can. And that's where we met Anna. And Anna joined the group. And we started monthly meeting for coffee, and then we'd walk around the park talking about theology and philosophy. Any question was allowed to be asked. And we listened as well as spoke. We were patient with people. And one day, at the end of one of our conversation, Anna is walking with me, and she turns to me and she says, you know what? I just realized that God is a person. Now, I never would have imagined that someone has to come to a place where they think of God as a person. But for her, this was life-changing. This was revelatory. First steps. A few months later on, we were walking around the same park, and she turned to me and she said, how can I know if God exists? All my training said, at this question, you aim for you just laser beam for the forehead, you know? And you do well, anyhow. Some reason the Spirit says, you let me handle this one. And I said, why don't you just ask God to reveal himself to you? And if he doesn't do it, I'm not going to be able to do it either. She said, okay. Several months later, we're at a cafe because it's raining on the day we were to walk around Bushy Park. And at the end of our meal, it was a brunch, at the end of our meal, Kuba was there for some reason. He had gone off. And she turned to me and she said, you know what? Do you remember that conversation we had a couple months ago when I asked you about whether or not I could know that God was real? I said, yeah, I remember that. And do you remember your answer? And I said, remind me. And she said, you just said, why don't you ask God to reveal that to me? And she said, that was so freeing. That was absolutely freeing. Several months later, she said, do you have a church in the area that I could attend? And I recommended our church, and I recommended another evangelical church in the area of the city where we were near. And she began to attend, and she began to attend. And she even joined the custodial team, you know. She began to read her Bible. She began to pray. And several months later, we're walking around the park, and she turns to me. And I had asked her this time. I said, so where are you in your journey of faith? And she goes, I've decided to follow Jesus. And she said, the main reason that I chose Jesus is that if God is a person and he's always present, I will never be alone. That was her reason. Because of your involvement in missions with your missionaries, stories like this are possible. And you are a vital part of Anna's story, just as well as we are. Okay? So, thank you.